That's my new assistant. She's wonderful. Okay, just a couple things. Again, Jim Hawk, I'm the executive director here at Neighbor to Neighbor. And what I want to make sure that we're, I guess, clear on is we're not making any decisions about legislation tonight. We're not here to vote up or down. This is an information session. What I hope is that you'll have the opportunity to hear from Council Member Withers and from Shauna Whitlaw about this proposal. Ask questions that you may have, and then for us to have a discussion about the proposed legislation. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm going to make a couple requests. Well, basic introductions, I guess, are important. First of all, when people come into the room, we automatically mute you. We do that because there are so many dogs, babies, fireworks, gunshots, police cars, ambulances, and so getting rid of all that noise. That doesn't mean that we want you to sit here and be quiet for a full hour. Our hope is that if you have something to say or a question that you want to ask, that you'll ask it. Simply unmute yourself. We're also going to ask that when at least when you're asking question or making comment, that you turn your camera on so that we can see who we're talking to, unless you're a nudist or you're having dinner and you're a really sloppy eater, then we don't need to see that. But if you're able to, that just helps us. We are a network of people who care passionately about neighborhoods across this metropolitan area. And so part of this event is a networking so that we get to meet people and learn people and find out who we are aligned with. So if you'll do that, and if you do ask a question, if you'd please, you don't have to give your first and last name, but because this isn't a Metro Council meeting, if you just give your first name at the very least and the neighborhood that you're part of, so that we get a sense of where you're coming from. This is really exciting. Last comment I'm going to make. We have people representing over 32 of the 35 council districts tonight. And so we're really excited about that because that means that we're really getting a sense of metro area and what people are thinking. So without further ado, I'm very glad that Council Member Withers called and asked and said, could we have a conversation with neighborhood leaders about this proposed legislation? And of course, we said yes, and that we want to do this more frequently. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to make his presentation. And then once the presentation's done, I'll come back and facilitate questions and then comments. Brett, thank you for being here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim. And thank you to everyone for your attendance. This is great. I'm really happy to see not just a large number of people, but a lot of folks from around the county. That's why I reached out to Jim at Neighbor to Neighbor. It's always hard to reach everybody, but Neighbor to Neighbor has such a great reach throughout the county. Even in a district like District 6, every neighborhood association sometimes is a little bit different. When you also have HOAs, sometimes they're set up a little bit differently. And since this is a countywide piece of legislation, we wanted to have the broadest reach that we could so that we can allow you as representatives of neighborhood associations or HOAs to get your questions answered about this legislation. As a lot of you know, Metro government's been going through a lot of changes lately, reorganizations a little bit. And so Shanna Whitelaw, I think actually comes to us from Metro Water. We have moved some things from Metro government into what is now the Nashville Department of Transportation, and other things moved over to water that used to be Public Works. So please pardon our dust as Metro government is reorganizing in ways that we think will be more efficient to serve you. So if you hear myself or others use maybe an outdated term, that's why. But a lot of things that used to be Public Works are now Nashville Department of Transportation, and some people wear hats in both of those departments until we get both of those new departments fully staffed. But so the purpose of this legislation is, this actually was brought to me by the administration, by Shanna Whitelaw. Had reached out and said, hey, Councilmember Withers, I know you've got a lot of neighborhood groups. Would you be interested in sponsoring this legislation? And so I was really delighted to do that. I think this brings opportunities to some neighborhood groups that we didn't have previously. Currently, Metro law requires that if you're building an encroachment in the public right of way, that you have to have insurance. And some neighborhood groups and organizations are able to do that. Some of them already have that. Some of them have a little bit more resources to be able to get that insurance, but not all of them do. And so what this legislation allows is to, for organizations that meet certain criteria, that they could potentially have a signage or a beautification project in the public right of way. And we would be able to waive that insurance requirement in at least some cases. So this won't necessarily help everybody, but it will help more people than we're able to help now. And we hope that this eases some burdens on some of the HOAs or neighborhood associations who are trying to beautify your neighborhood, help to remove one of those barriers. So that's the legislative intent of that. I think the announcement that went out through Neighbor to Neighbor includes a link to the legislation so you can read the text as well as the legal analysis. But that is my summary view of it. And I would like to go ahead and turn that over to Ms. Shanna Whitelaw if I can. And I know that Shanna has a presentation that she'd like to share. And then what we are really hoping to do now that we have so many of y'all assembled is to spend the balance of the hour just answering whatever questions you have before this comes back before the Metro Council at the first meeting in September. So if that's okay, I will go ahead and turn it over to Shanna Whitelaw.
Thank you, Council Member. I really appreciate it. And it's fun to see all the faces. And my presentation, I'll give a little history. As Council Member Withers says, we're in transition. And so I was part of Public Works for the last year, working over there to kind of help figure out, were we going to do an NDOT and how things would divide out. And this is one of the things that came up when I was at Public Works, was folks coming in wanting to do some beautification projects or wanting to do things in the right of way, and us finding out, well, legally, we really can't let you do that unless you can prove insurance. And that can be a real burden to certain groups and certain folks when really you're just trying to put beautiful flowers in, or a bush or something nice, a small sign, and that became a burden. So that's why we approached the administration and approached Councilmember Withers, because we do know of his involvement with so many neighborhood groups and everything. I have a short presentation today just to orient us around encroachment. So I'll see if I can get this going. Let's see if I can, and y'all can tell me if it shows up and looks like a presentation at some point here. Let's hope it does.
You're good.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. That always makes me feel good, because I feel like after a year and a half, you think we should all be able to do this, but still. So really just want to orient around what encroachment is. I'm sure most of you all know what's going on, but just in case, and this I hope will help kind of generate some questions as we go through this. So really, what is an encroachment? Well, I think we all know it's an intrusion on someone's property, but Metro owns the right of way. And we have a lot of conversation a lot of times about what's the difference between public right of way and right of way generally in common ground. So a public right of way is public use. As I think everyone knows, this is where the sidewalks go. It's commonly folks will talk about it. Well, if you look at where the NES poles are or the power poles are, that kind of defines the right of way. And that's a general rule of thumb, but it's technically is tied to the width of the road from the center line. And depending on what type of road it is, we'll let you know that. So, but things that are in the right of way are flowers, light signs, things that you would see. If you go into commercial areas, you have the giant signs that are maybe over the sidewalk, or an awning over the sidewalk. Those are all considered encroachments as well. And as I said, it's different than common ground, because normally common ground is actually private property that's owned by a platted subdivision and an HOA, and they use that as common ground. So But we know most neighborhoods, older neighborhoods particularly, don't have that formal or HOA. So that's the kind of groups that we're really looking to help. So just quick photos to get us oriented. Old monument signs, things like these signs that you see, they most of these have been grandfathered in some areas. And by grandfathered in, it means they were there when pretty much everyone who still works at NDOT or formerly Public Works arrived. So we call that grandfathered in. So they kind of get that idea. So you can see two different kinds of signs.
Hey, Sean,
have,
excuse me, but you're still on the title page.
Oh, am I not moving?
Nope.
Oh, well, thank you for letting me know. I do not then have you set up like I thought you did. I'm sitting here just showing all sorts of things. Let's see, you need this screen. Now, do you see like a neighborhood sign with a picture?
That's good.
Okay, so I'm going to scroll back. I'm going to go back a little bit here and see if I can go forward. Hold on a second. I'm having difficulty, typical me. And that's how we go. Let me get you to this presentation. Are you still seeing the sign?
Yes.
Is it moving now?
Yes.
So there's a picture. Do we see a picture of some monument signs?
Yes.
Yay, sorry about all of that. I have two screens and obviously I shared the wrong one. That does happen, I guess. So talking about monument signs, here's some grandfathered in monument signs, some new signs. I think folks are used to seeing these sorts of things, the different types of things we're looking at. I want to point out some of these you can see they're kind of sturdy. If that, if a car hit one of these, you could have some damage. So that's something that we want to consider when we're looking at right of way. And it's one reason why current law is that you have to have insurance because of what could happen to a pedestrian or a vehicle if they hit a sign. This is the kind of sign a lot of people think are in the right of way, but they're not. These are common area signs. You can see the telephone pole there. That suggests that it's behind, and people look at this and say, well, why can't we do that? Well, that's really in the common area and being maintained by a formal HOA. Medians, when you're in the medians improvement, you can see to the left, one of the improvements we think is great, but the grass is kind of growing, it's getting a little weedy, it could become a site issue. So those are the kinds of things that we're a little bit concerned about. But beautiful plantings and flowers are things that that we want to encourage. On the left, you see a lovely median that someone decided to neglect, and that's probably NDOT, to be honest. Right now, there's kinds of weeds and doesn't look pretty. And then the one to the far right, that's over by Belmont University, and Belmont went through the full process of getting the encroachment to put into the roundaway and to maintain the flowers. So you can just see that there's a lot of sort of different opportunities for things. Bikes, the B-cycle program, bike racks, those are considered encroachments into right-of-ways. And the B-cycle folks went through the process in order to do it and are insured because someone hits that. The other thing it's a little interesting that someone probably doesn't think about as an encroachment, but does come up, is street signs. Several neighborhood groups we know really like to have, a street sign that's a little more decorative or it announces like the Belmont Hillsborough sign. Those are considered encroachments as well. So NDOT and Metro provides for the lovely green sign. But if you want to do something or a neighborhood group wants to put something like this together, that would also qualify in an encroachment area. So these are the kinds of things from a neighborhood standpoint that we're talking about. Does anybody have any quick questions that maybe, or we'll save them all to last if you want, but if there's a quick question about what an encroachment might be or anything like that. I can't see. I'm hoping Jim can help with if there's questions.
I don't see any.
I figure not. I think pretty much everyone knows this, but just in case, and knowing that it was recorded, it would be nice for posterity for someone who might not.
Oh,
So
Sheila, I'm sorry. Sheila has a question.
Sure.
Hi, I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Hey, Sheila, could you tell us where you're calling from?
Oh, okay. Yes, our subdivision is Skyline Village subdivision at the corner of Hunley and Bellevue Drive.
Mhm.
And that's more like, I guess you would say North Nashville, not far from Skyline Hospital.
Mhm.
And our subdivision, we just put up a sign and we got approval before we put it up, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding what this is all about. But the encroachment, is that where right to the right of way of it?
That would mean
Like
your
it's-
sign is in the right of way, which is right adjacent to the street.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it's everything that's really close to the street. Think of like where the sidewalk would be if there was a sidewalk,
Okay.
or maybe right behind the sidewalk. if that was
Okay, it's
there.
behind the sidewalk. Okay, gotcha. So that
And-
would be the encroachment.
That would be the area where the encroachment would occur, correct?
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And James has a quick question.
Hi, I'm James D'Amato. I'm in Edgefield. I'm one of Jim's neighbors. Do you have a solid record of what has been historically claimed? Well, we have signs that are in the right of way. We have an entrance sign and a bunch of street signs.
Mhm.
Is that kept in good record at Metro?
I'll be honest with you, no. We're doing the best we can and we think we have a pretty good inventory, but every day we find something new. I'm not gonna deny that.
If I need to pursue that, are you the person I reach out to at Metro?
You can certainly start with me and I will make sure to get you in contact with the right folks.
Thank
Yes.
you.
That's it. You can go back.
All right, so continuing on. Here is, for those who like to go into the weeds, is the current regulations in chapter 13. And this is the how a person or firm is not allowed to put anything into the right of way without without going through council. So it's really not NDOT or Metro. Actually, council approves every encroachment. And this is the legislation. The kicker that we brought to wanting to make a change is this about providing liability insurance and maintaining liability insurance. That is the concern, and this is the request that we've asked Councilmember Withers to sponsor. And so here is the proposed change, which, as he said, was in the link. And as you can see, that in highlight, the change would be that if the association is legally constituted, a nonprofit, and doesn't need to provide insurance, can do something as long as the director of public works, because although we are called NDOT, legally we're still public works. I like to think of this right now as we're kind of like Madonna or Cher or something. We have our own name, but legally we are still public works. Has determined that it in writing that it is in public interest. So this is an opportunity for things that would pose no risk or harm to the public to get put into the right of way and maintained in the right of way without the insurance. So this is what we think is hopefully a welcome relief for some neighborhood groups. So let's talk about what all goes into applying for an encroachment and what the process is. The one thing about this legislation, it does not change the application process or everything that you have to go through. And I will be the first to say it's not an easy process. I mean, this is right away. It's the city's right of way. So we want to make sure all the checks and balances are made and getting to city council for their approval. So it is a process that takes a while, but it can be a value at the end of the day. So as we said, it's a little interesting. Aerial encroachments, which I'm pretty sure most neighborhood groups would not be doing. These would be, like I said, awnings or signs. They only require one resolution. Anything that's underground or a building, and we would consider on ground to be underground, is going to require an ordinance by council. This includes the planning, signs, anything. And the way you do it is you submit a letter to the chief of engineer, and I'm going to show you the links of how to do this at the end with the signed agreement. And the agreement is also on the website, And you have to have details, how many flowers, what's the signs, etc. And right now, currently, this is the regulation requirement. So you can see that the insurance requirements are not small. They can be substantial, but this is what we're hoping. We're hoping not every neighborhood group will need this. And then there obviously is always, because we are covering costs of processing fee. So here's the thing that I think is really important for everyone to know, that even though we want to change the regulations to provide for opportunity to not have insurance, these are the kinds of activities that we will require insurance, and we would make a recommendation to council, and we believe are valuable and in the interest of public good. The height or size or construction of the sign is such that if a vehicle ran into it and it could cause harm to the vehicle or to persons, or if a bike runs into it, a biker runs into it, you would need insurance. That's what the liability insurance is for. If you have irrigation, or you're going to have an irrigation system, same thing, because once again, you have the potential that they would hit the irrigation, we'd have water, you'd have damage, and you are going underground now. You're beginning to excavate underground in a deep way. Lights, some folks want lights on their signs, they want electrical approval on the signs. Once again, you're now entering something that could have a liability issue. If it's on a state route or an arterial or collector street, possibly, depending on what the street is being used for, what the speed limit is on the street, what the state we would reference with them, that might be something that would require insurance. Not always, depending on the state route or the collector street and where it is, maybe. And then the other thing that I think is important to note, that if the neighborhood, the subdivision has an established funded HOA, this isn't a way to get out of providing insurance, because established HOA programs, they have insurance. They're maintaining insurance for their community and for their common grounds and everything anyway. So we would recommend to council that, once again, if you can get insurance, you should get insurance, and if you have that ability. Couple of other considerations if we're doing a beautification projects is that we would want to know what the plantings are going to be and what the mature height of a tree or a plant's going to be. Once again, we think it looks pretty, and 5 years later, it's become a site clearance problem. It's become an issue for those who are trying to use the right of way. And a maintenance and upkeep agreement would be included too. It is the thing that what we don't want is for beautiful flowers and beautiful things to occur, and then something happens, and now it becomes a site issue, and such of it's not pretty anymore, and now it's a nuisance issue, and now the community's not happy because of that. So we'd want to know that the neighborhood is committed to keeping it up. So all of those are the negatives. So we continue on with the application process that we think are the positives. This can take a long period of time. Every encroachment, when we say it goes through council, before it can go through council, it's got to go through planning commission as a mandatory referral. So you are working with NDOT staff for a period of time. We're helping you, support you through a planning commission and a mandatory referral. And then obviously legal will review everything along the way. So it does take a while. So back to council, once again, aerials or resolution. Most of the things we're talking about are underground, on ground, and an ordinance, which is 3 readings. That's the 3 readings, which in itself is 2 months right there, assuming everything goes well. And I don't have it here, but I do think it's important that you get your council member involved early on, because council member sponsorship through both planning commission and council is going to be necessary and needed. As council member Withers can say, they're going to be expected to show up at the committees and say, yes, we are for this. So you always want to get your council member involved early on in the program and the process. Once approved, then you're good to go. The encroachment can be placed. But one of the things that we also want to make sure of is that there are other permits. Doing work in the right of way is separate than the actual encroachment being in the right of way. So there are permits if you're going to need to, close a lane of the road because you're bringing in something, or you're doing some construction. If you're doing some level of excavation for the plantings or the signage, then that's a different permit process. So after that, we will direct you to permitting to do it. And then obviously, although it's not legally required, we would expect and hope that prior notification, usually with any excavation or lane closure, we're asking contractors to notify those immediately impacted. So if this is going to go in front of 2 or 3 houses, hey, we hope that you've already had that communication with your neighbors and they're all on board with it, but we also want to make sure before it actually happens. And then finally, as I talked about a little bit before, if it's not maintained and it becomes a site nuisance, we do reserve the right to remove it as it is in the right of way and it's not being maintained as it was promised. So the application process, there's a lot of moving parts. We recognize there's a lot of moving parts. That's not something that we're changing because it is the same process we use for businesses, commercial, neighborhood, and everyone, and it protects our right of way and makes sure that we've gone through everything to make sure everything's, council approved. So forms and how you can do it. I don't know if everybody has been out to notice, probably Nashville.gov is a new website. We have a complete new look. It's been a little challenging, I will say, to find some things. So I appreciate that, but you can always go to the Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure. You'll do the little drop down navigation and there'll be one called permits. That's a little highlight. And then when you get to that page, you can scroll down and it'll say encroachment. And then you click on it and the application process will give you all sorts of forms. You'll see what the requirements are, what the agreement looks like, insurance requirements if they're necessary, and just some samples as well. So I believe with that, that is all I had. I just wanted to orient us so that we could then begin the questions and comment section from there. So I'll stop sharing my screen. So let me go to stop sharing. Oops, yep, there we go. Stop sharing. So we're all, so we can all see what's going on. There we go.
There's the amazing group of people.
Yeah, this is the good people.
Brett, did you have anything else that you wanted to say before we move into some Q&A time?
No, I think Shanna's presentation was pretty thorough. Just, again, for I think one thing to remember, particularly for HOAs, is you do sometimes have those common area portions of a property, and that's not what this would apply to. And I think also some of probably our older neighborhoods, I know Eastwood, and I think even Edgefield has a sign. Those were done, I want to say, in the earlier this century, but during the Purcell administration, I believe there had been some funding through that went through the mayor's office of neighborhoods and Metro Council to put those signs into place. So some of those signs I think were actually done with council approval at that time, and that is probably is how they came to be there. So this would really apply to new signage or beautification projects. But other than that, I just want to hear what neighbors across the county have to say or to ask. So thank you.
All right, then let's open it up. And again, just a reminder, if you would, we invite you, if you're going to ask a question, to turn your camera on, obviously unmute. Reminder here to unmute, and then share your name and your neighborhood. First name's fine. Who has questions or well, let's start with questions. Are there any questions?
I have a
Rafaela,
question.
I probably butchered your name, but Rafaela?
Rafaela, yes, very good. Hi, Mr. Withers, it's nice to see you. I do have a question and a concern. I live in the West End Midtown area. I'm a member of the Coalition for Nashville Neighborhoods, and I do live in a mid-rise, so we have an HOA. My concern is about these encroachments in the right-of-way. Will they be, before they're permitted, will they be, because you're not needing to have liability, as an older person, things in the right of way can be an obstacle to some people. For handicapped people, you know, these scooters drive me to distraction because they're left all over the place. But anyway, what I'm asking is, you know, if I'm very careful about when I walk, but I'm getting older, and you know, falling is a real bad thing for an older person. So it really can make you go down, you know, in your health. So that's my concern about these encroachments and about not having the liability, you know, so maybe you can address that.
That's a great question, Ray. I appreciate you raising that. We definitely want to make sure that our sidewalks and public areas are safe for everyone to use. And so I'll, if I can, defer that to Ms. Whitelaw to see how those things are vetted within the current practice as well as proposed.
Sure. Thank you, council member. I like to think of it as that we have two lines of defense. First line is NDOT itself and NDOT personnel themselves looking at this to see when we go out. That's why we want detailed drawings. That's why we want to look at these things, is to determine, is it going to be a problem? Is this going to be something that could harm somebody who is walking or biking in the right of way? That's our first line of defense. Second line of defense is council themselves and planning commission and in the council. So every one of these will go through the complete vetting with the council. So if there's a concern, it's always going to be a public notice. It's not going to come about and the next thing you know, it's there. It will be put out an agenda, public notice. Your council member, you can communicate with your council member whether you see it as a concern or not. And most of these would be a 3 reading. So there would be an opportunity to have, you know, it's not one of those that's one and done and you missed it kind of thing. It will be out there for 3 times. So to us, we look at it as 2 lines of defense of looking at it from a technical and a safety standard for NDOT, and then followed up by an opportunity for engagement with others that we hope to engage, but might have missed through the council process and the legislative process.
Okay, so one more thing. When you say people will be notified, like how far do you have to live from the proposed encroachment to be notified by mail? Because, you know, honestly, I'm a very diligent person and I follow the council very carefully, as Mr. Withers knows. I send them an email every 2 weeks. I go over the agenda completely every 2 weeks. And I think I'm diligent, and I do ask questions, don't always get answers, but I do ask the questions anyway. So my question is, you know, not a lot of people in Nashville pay attention, you know, and so things could get passed and slip through and not everybody's going to know about it, and even in the neighborhood.
I appreciate your concern and I do, but I do want to be clear in that it is not our intention to make this, I guess what to say is easy and carte blanche that everybody can now have an encroachment without insurance. I hope, as you could see, there are many things that we would not consider without insurance. What we're really wanting this for and what we're really trying to help with the public is beautification type of projects, which are flowers, small shrubs, things of that nature that in many ways there's trees already in the right of way and there's flowers that are unpermitted already in the right of way. In that sense, we want to be able to allow a group to have that formality, and a sign, certainly very conscious of any type of sign or signage that would be something significant that could cause damage or could be a tripping hazard or any kind of damage would not be allowed without liability insurance. So this is not a way to eliminate insurance. This is an opening for those things that it seems odd to have insurance for flowers or bushes and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can chime in, I think Shanna did a great job of explaining this, but like this isn't for commercial ventures. This is typically is for a neighborhood or an HOA. Now, sometimes, even in District 6, I do have some HOAs, such as, if you know 5 Points, like Martin Corner Townhomes, next to the old Bill Martin store. There are kind of limited in District 6, but sometimes, they might want to put up a sign or put, flowers in the planting strip in front of their condominium association or something like that. But this legislation doesn't change anything for commercial ventures. It only is creating a little bit more of an easier process for some HOAs or neighborhood association groups. And usually those neighborhood association groups have their own communications tools or Facebook pages or groups that we can work with as council members to help get the word out about something that's being planned. So again, like hopefully if people are part of a neighborhood group or a townhouse group or something like that, which I know Ray you are, hopefully that y'all would be plugged in already into that group and would be able to kind of provide feedback early on about it. And one thing too, I do want to also express appreciation for is our very hardworking and underappreciated Metro Beautification Commissioners. And I know many of them are on here, but a lot of times the Metro Beautification Commissioners work on a lot of neighborhood cleanup efforts or planting flowers. We had great participation, just to give one example, in East Nashville along Shelby Avenue for major tree plantings and some of the side streets nearby there. Usually our beautification commissioners do a great job of working with the neighborhood groups and other stakeholders about some of these planting efforts in particular that we're trying to make a little bit easier.
Someone else have another question that they would like to ask?
I have a question.
Yes.
My name is Sheila and I live in Skyline Village. And my question is, what if your neighborhood doesn't have an HOA and you're not going to have an HOA and you have already gotten approval of the signage and everything? And would you be required to get insurance? Because it's not in the HOA that we have. And I did a signage and I got approval of it, and I make sure that it's maintained out of my own pocket because we don't have an HOA. So how would the insurance apply? Because I think they consider our area private property, but it's not. It's supposed to be maintained by Metro Public Works, and I'm having to deal with I think his name is Matt, and he's supposed to be working with affordable housing on taking care of some of the common areas that have not been maintained over the years. And it's creating a problem with the sewage drainage. How do we handle that?
I'd like to, for yours, it sounds like you have a very specific question related to some ongoing issues there that I think we probably would like to have a conversation with.
Okay.
If we can reach out and Jim, maybe you can help connect us together.
Okay.
And I'll put, I think my email's out there. It's shanna.whitelaw@nashville.gov.
Okay.
And Jim can certainly send my information. But you sound like you have a very specific. Now, if it is a sign, as Councilmember Withers says, that's a neighborhood sign that has been previously approved by previous administrations.
Yes, I think it was George Ackland. He was on the committee and he approved it.
Okay.
And I have a picture of the front entrance that I could share, and you can.
Sure. We can review that and look at that,
Okay.
that instance. And then also if there is some things that we need to be doing as far as cleanup of the right of way. And then I have both hats, one in NDOT and one in water services. So if there's a sewer issue, I can tie in, we can figure out what's going on there.
It's like a stormwater.
I got that too.
Oh, okay, good. Okay.
Water services, we're fortunate to have water, wastewater,
Okay.
stormwater, and now waste services. So yes.
Okay. Okay.
Sheila, we have Shauna's email address in the chat that you can copy.
Yes.
And just
Okay.
reach out to her. And for those of you neighborhood organizations that already have insurance, Miriam put in the chat, and it's a sidebar, but I just want to make sure you see it. That if any of you are familiar with insurance carriers who ensures neighborhood signage, she would like to know who you're using. And you can private message her, or you can do it to everyone. Back to the topic. Other questions?
Ron Tharp, Eastwood.
Hi, Ron.
Thank you all for holding this forum. If we're going to revisit this legislation regarding encroachments on right-of-ways, it appears to me that the process is still extremely complicated, extremely lengthy, and most importantly, the process changes which we're putting forth are going to affect relatively few problems associated with encroachment. These bigger projects are already coming through the official process. And so if we're wanting to make this a better process, why aren't we looking at the process rather than insurance? It's a very narrow focus for a problem that's kind of citywide. I mean, we all deal with neglected easements, easements that don't look great, easements that cause visual issues, but to revisit a process that is already a 4 or 5 month process for relatively simple projects just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, thanks for that. And Ron, I know you live on Roberts, which is like back in the day, neighbors on Roberts decided that they did not want sidewalks. And so they decided they wanted a boulevard instead and started just putting stuff in the middle of the street. And during that time, Mayor Purcell and the administration at that time sort of agreed to allow to create that boulevard there, which is in the public right of way. So that's a little bit unusual, but it's a great thing as well. But it does sort of, again, raise the issue that we're kind of talking about, is sometimes neighborhood groups want to have a beautification project like that boulevard there on Roberts, but they today would have very significant infrastructure costs to do that if they wanted to do that. And one of the things that this does is to make that a little bit easier by removing some of those insurance costs, at least in some cases, for some of those beautification projects. Now, right-of-way management is a huge problem countywide. You're absolutely right about that. And this legislation doesn't mean to tackle all of that. Metro Council has addressed some of the like lane closures and some things piece by piece. And the Nashville Department of Transportation, we hope, will, once it's a little bit better constituted and better staffed, we'll have a little bit more resources to manage some of those, including sometimes just having staff to go out and mow right away. So, I mean, we have a lot of things like you mentioned that are just grown up that Metro has just not in the past been able to maintain. So, but Metro Council has worked on some legislation that will improve our management of right of way from a legal perspective. In our budget, we're trying to add a little bit more staffing to maintain some of those public right of ways. And we are also enhancing requirements for, like you say, for some of the major projects in town, that now if you do a project along a street, you have to improve the sidewalk. You have to, in some cases, add street trees. You have to maintain it. We've some of that legislation is so new that we haven't really seen the benefit of it yet. But it is a very large problem throughout the county, as you mentioned, and we're sort of tackling it in bits and pieces. Really, what this legislation is focused on is trying to make it a little bit easier, at least financially, for neighborhood groups like Eastwood Neighbors to do some beautification projects that are not major obstructions, but do beautify the community.
Someone else? Lisa.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Anita, you're next.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lisa. I got you all.
Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Lisa. I am here tonight with really two hats. One is I'm a new commissioner for District 19 on the Beautification Commission. And I'm also on the board of our HOA in Midtown. So thank you for hosting this. I'm learning quite a bit. My question is probably best directed to Shauna. regarding, you spoke about the beautification projects such as the small shrubs and planting flowers. Does Metro have areas within the county, or in our case, within District 19 or Midtown, where you would like to see beautification projects, where you would like to see the neighborhoods associations or groups come together? Is there certain focus areas that you all have identified that would be helpful for someone like myself to know about and to help organize around?
Great question, and congratulations on becoming a commissioner. We're always pleased to have new beautification commissioners, and I think that would be the best place to start. Sharon Smith really leads the team of beautification commissioners, and she's always working with NDOT and working with the beautification team to identify areas that we could use and have pretty. So there are areas. I'm not as familiar with them, and Sharon would be the best place to start, because I do think there are areas. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Anita.
Yes, I'm Anita Armstrong, president of Greenwood Neighborhood Association in East Nashville. Brett, we have a signage. It's like a brick signage. That's at the corner of McFerrin and Sharp Avenue. And it's also in an area, in a grassy area that Metro cuts. And so over the last few years, they have bumped into it with their lawnmowers, and it has finally fallen. The brick signage has fallen. And so they have contacted Sean, our councilman, about what are we going to do about that sign, since it's broken and it has fallen over. It's been on the ground for a while. So Sean is going to look into if we can find somebody that will donate their time to put our signage back up. And my question then is Metro, would they have any responsibility for knocking our brick sign down? Or should we have had insurance on that?
Now, that is a really great question, and probably Shanna Whitelaw can help us to research that a little bit more. A lot of, like I said, a lot of those signs, like the one that you're mentioning, my understanding is a lot of those were put in place by Metro, I believe during the Purcell administration, with allocations through council. They gave a certain number of funds to each district, and a lot of those signs kind of went up, like I said, probably early 2000s. And one of the things that happens sometimes with governments, and you see this a lot too with what used to be the community development block grants, like MDHA used to be able to give out for a lot of beautification efforts. A lot of times those grants were one-time funds, and they did not always have a maintenance package on them. So so then you end up with what you have described, which is where the sign, it just deteriorates over time, or it's struck by lawnmower equipment. We have a lot of those signs that are struck actually by drivers of vehicles who are uninsured. And then you have a question about what do you do about it after the fact? Certainly we've had that on Riverside Drive. Tony Vietti can regale us all with lots of stories about that. But perhaps Shanna Whitelaw can help research that one for you to determine if it is determined that Metro government itself contributed to that damage, then there may be a possibility for looking at a claim that way. But that may need to be researched offline a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's McFarland and Sharp Avenue, correct?
Yeah.
I wrote that down, and we'll look into it and do some research, definitely.
Anita,
And Councilmember Parker is your council member, right? We can work through him.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
and Anita, it might be a good idea for you to send Shauna an email so that she can get back to you.
I will do that. I will go down there maybe tomorrow and take a picture of it and then put it in the email and copy Britt and Shauna and Sean.
That would be great. I'd appreciate it. A picture tells 1,000 words. Thank you.
I'll take care of it.
Someone else, anybody else?
I have one.
Yes, George, hello.
Good evening. Thank you for this informative time tonight. I've learned a lot. My question is, as a beautification commissioner for District 3, I want to plant trees, small trees, in the grassy area between the sidewalk and the curb along Doverside Drive going down toward what is it? Down toward Parkwood. Okay. Now these trees won't be very large trees, obviously. They won't grow to be very large at maturity. But I need you to walk me through what I need to do. I've been in contact with Meg Morgan and Ruth Nashville, and this project will not be on the auspices of Parkwood Neighborhood Association. I was trying to sponsor this myself as the beautification commissioner. So tell me what I need to do.
Sir, trees are one of the things that water services and stormwater sees as part of their infrastructure. As a beautification commissioner, I would reach directly out to Sharon Smith.
Yes.
Because one of the things that they are trying to do is plant more trees in the right of way, even sponsoring through some grants. And that's one of the things that happened in East Nashville, as Councilmember Withers talked about. So you actually have an opportunity that if it is a good fit and it's a good look, I think that through the Beautification Commission, Sharon will be able to help you. We have an arborist and who can say, will it grow in the strip? Will it work? What's the tree height? All that sort of stuff. So that would be where I would say start first with Sharon, and she will get you in touch with the arborist and the tree folks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And if I could just tag onto that, we do have a lot of tree plantings through Root Nashville and other organizations. A lot of times those tree plantings, if it's like in the planting strip, between the sidewalk and the curb, a lot of those probably are not going to go through this level of a process for an underground encroachment. The one thing though that it is good to plan for, in my experience with the tree plantings, is a lot of times everyone shows up to plant the trees. And then getting folks out to maintain the trees is where it gets to be a little bit more problematic, whether pruning the trees or watering the trees. So that's just one thing. One thing that I've learned the hard way. We had a lot of neighbors get out and plant trees, and then a year later they're dead, unfortunately, because no one watered them. So working with Sharon Smith would be great to see if you can come up with a way to ensure that they're watered, and maybe what the plan is for pruning them as they do grow out. But probably the tree plantings in those kind of planting strips like that would not require this level of approval process, unless you're talking about like a median or an island that's in the middle of the street where you might have a little bit more of a visibility issue. But Shanna Whitelaw would be able to vet that. One other thing too, just again, we all learn by experience, but sometimes sometimes when you plant trees, like street trees, they can make it difficult to see stop signs. And so that may be something to think about, how you might need to trim the trees to make sure you can still see the stop sign that's behind it.
Right.
But appreciate you doing that. It's so important to get trees planted in our neighborhoods, and we want to make that easy as well. So thank you.
And George, Meg put a message in the chat about their support for that program that includes the times maintenance. So you may want to look at that too.
Yeah, I plan to bring it to my association, since I'm president of that as well. So I plan to bring it to them, see what I can get done.
Yay. More trees, more trees.
More trees. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else for Q&A? We got about 4 minutes left. All right. Any comments that anybody wants to make? Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, thank you. Just quickly, we have an area in our district. It's on Demumbrian corridor from I-40 up to Music Row. And I did tour the neighborhood and walked that with Jennifer Smith recently from Metro. And there is a median there that is Metro property that has some trees and other trees that aren't doing very well. A lot of the grassy area has died, and it's just looking somewhat sad. And it's a very high trafficked area. Similar to what Shanna was saying, in some other metro areas that I guess Metro is just behind and not able to keep keep the area watered and refreshed and so forth. Is there a way, I guess this is a question to Shanna, to get an area like that prioritized?
I guess the answer is sort of. I mean, that's honest. We have a list. We do have a list, and I think your area is on that list, but definitely we are working through our list. Actually, just in the last 2 weeks, of areas that we know need help and need to have some maintenance. And as Councilmember Withers says, getting staffing and hiring, we've hired some folks and we're trying to get to that. So I like to say that everybody thinks they're a priority. You're right, your area is very much a high visibility, but I think a lot of other neighbors would probably say the same. But yeah, we are aware of many of these areas. And if you walked with Jennifer Smith, then she has put it on a list because we work with her. Jennifer used to be part of NDOT and is transitioned to water now. So she's sort of a bridge between the two departments, which is really great, with Sharon Smith herself. So I suspect that we are already aware of that, and I'll touch base with Jennifer to confirm that it's on our list.
Okay, thank you.
But, yeah.
And one thing that, just to tag onto that, sometimes we are benefited by like a business association or something like that. Sometimes they sponsor that. Even in the 5 Points area, we have a neighbor and a business owner who donates out of his apartment management company, that he provides mulching and some maintenance for some of our stuff on Shelby Avenue, for instance. So sometimes you can find a good partnership with a local business association or a merchant who will help keep an eye on some of those areas, because it benefits their business and community too. So whatever resources we can muster, sometimes the more the better.
Thank you.
I see that James has his hand up.
Hi, it's me from Edgefield again. Just a quick observation. It's the challenge I see here, whether it's for implementing beautification and encroachment and insuring it, or getting that insurance waived in certain circumstances, is ownership. The challenge that we have in Edgefield, for example, is that our neighborhood association imploded about 10 years ago, and we lost track of the obligation for insurance of our street signs and neighborhood entrance signs. And as I hear about a number of the different circumstances that have come up in the meeting, some of them are neighborhood associations, some of them are beautification commissioners, and some of them are individuals who are interested in beautification. And it's hard to make that persistent. Even with, we were once one of the mighty neighborhoods of Nashville. We've kind of fallen into disarray. So it's something, I guess, to keep an eye out, as both from the Metro side and as a community, is, are you going to be able to make this persist? If you're going to want to put a sign out there or plant a bunch of trees or shrubs, are you going to be able to maintain that in the 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to come? That's my speech. Well,
and I'll tag on to that, and what Jim, what you mentioned there with Edgefield, is kind of related to what Anita Armstrong from Greenwood kind of mentioned. Is sometimes you get like a one-time grant, or you have a fundraiser or whatever, and you get this neat street sign or a neighborhood sign or whatnot, and then it gets damaged, and then and then what? And so this legislation, Metro government isn't necessarily taking over saying that Metro government's going to replace it for you. Unfortunately, we can't do that. But you're right. This is to sort of make it easier to do some of those projects, especially I think for like the decorative street signs a little bit, if it's like an add-on to an existing street sign, or for tree or flower plantings or things like that. That's really kind of what we have in mind with this legislation and trying to make it easier. But you're right, for neighborhood groups or HOAs or other organizations, civic organizations, it's best if they have a long-term plan for how they want to maintain it. That's definitely true. So thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments before we wrap this up? Okay. So just a couple announcements before we move forward. First of all, if you are new to one of our sessions, don't assume that because you signed up for this session that we're going to throw you onto our email list and you're going to get emails from us all the time. We believe in letting people opt in. So if you want to get our newsletter and you want to find out about events like this directly in the future, you can click on the link that we put in the chat, or you can go to our website and sign up for our e-newsletters there. And you'll also be given asked to select your neighborhood passions so that you can discuss, we can make sure that we get you the information that you really need as opposed to all the stuff that's out there. The other thing I just want to note is on Monday, we're dropping registration. We're opening registration for 2 courses. This is the first time we've ever offered it before. It is called Neighborhood Disaster Preparedness and Response Training. A lot of people know how to get their family ready for a disaster. When we worked the flood, when we worked the tornado, we realized that a lot of neighborhoods just weren't prepared for that disaster. And the truth is, neighborhoods that are prepared for the next disaster are going to be able to recover much more quickly. And so this class is for neighborhoods who really want to be prepared for the next disaster. And then the other course that we're going to be opening up is our Policy and Zoning 101 class. This is for people who really want to understand the process that developers go through in order to build. And so it's a 3-session class. It's outstanding if you haven't taken it. We've had 32 graduates since last September. So that's coming up. And then finally, for those of you who are leaders of neighborhood organizations, soon we are going to be announcing for the first the Emerging Neighborhood Leaders Academy. And this is not for seasoned experts like yourselves, but what we're inviting you to do is to look down line at people that you feel like could be good leaders for your neighborhood organization, but they need to know a little bit more about how Metro runs. They need to understand a little bit more about what a neighborhood organization is or how to facilitate meetings. That's going to be happening in October. It's a 4 or 5 session series. We'll be announcing that within the next few weeks. But I really encourage you to begin thinking now about who you would like to send to that class, because I do think having prepared people already in place when you have your elections is a great idea. And so that's one way to do that. All right. I want to thank Councilman Withers for contacting us and being our first council member to bring something to a discussion like this. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for your openness. Shauna, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy week to be here and share with us. And again, I want to thank everybody else who showed up. Our motto is great neighborhoods don't happen by accident. It takes committed people like me and you to be here and to show up and to really speak up for our neighborhoods. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you all the next time.